Okay, we are actually in the middle of a discussion. The last time we want to just review a point we spoke about and that'll take us to the next level and back into the sugya. So last time we were discussing the machlokas, Tosas, and Reb Nissim Gaon, whether it helps. Reb Nissim Gaon brought in the rush. The Tosas entertained this Havamid to which he was dochet from Lashon of the Gemara by basic nessus, whether or not das helps for bias the bias. That's what we left off discussing, and we spoke out of Hakira. I'll find it. Spoke out of Hakira of to understand that what is the pshat in Kiddush Malchus Suda, and when we have these drushes, or we have limudim, we have sforas. The etzim sfora of Kiddush Malchus Suda, is it really a actual din and a makam that you need to have Kiddush in the makam of the Suda? So there's some kind of an Indian to have it in the same place, like Lashon Rashban, the makam kriya sham tehei oneg. So there's a din in the makam that should be the two in the same place, or is Kiddush Malchus Suda more a borrowed term that it should be Malchus Suda in order that it shouldn't be Hesach Hadas? But the ikar is really that there should be a connection between the Kiddush and the Suda in a way that there shouldn't be a Hesach Hadas. So if you're in a different place completely, then we say there's a stam, like stam and a milso, there's Hesach Hadas between one house and another. But if it's not in the Malchus Suda, stam and a milso, there is a Hesach Hadas. We use that to explain the Machlokas Tosas and Reb Nissim Gaon that according to Tosas, with Pashtus, it's a din in the Makam, and has to be in the same Makam. The Makam is defined according to Tosas by anything that's b'bayis echad, tachas gag echad, that it's all considered b'makam suda. So you need a Makam, and that's the definition of the Makam, at least in a way that it helps das for that makam. We'll get back to that in a second, more precisely. But the Reb Nissim Gaon holds that the din of Kiddush Malchus Suda is not a din in the same makam suda, but it's a din in not having Hesach Hadas between the two, that the two should be connected, to enjoined or connected to the Kiddush and the so and that those two stadim of Chakira we thought might be totally on the two Lashonos of the Rashbam. First Lashon Rashbam is, and he explains Kiddush Malchus Suda. He says that medrashu, it's a medrash of that Makam Kriya Sham Tehei Oneg. In the place of the Kriya, you need to have the Oneg. So the Oneg and the Kriya, the Kiddush, need to be in the same place. So that's mashal from that first Lashon Rashbam, that it's mamash din and the Makam to be together. But in the second shot, the Rashbam, where he says Yanami, that it's chashivas a yayin. The yayin, when it says that kasher al hayayin, mashma like more the chashav yayin, whereas the yayin more chashav, it's connected to a suda. So the ikar din of Kiddush Malchus Suda would be to connect it to a suda, because we have the suda al yayin in a way that there shouldn't be a disconnect between the two, and then it remains yayin chashav because the yayin has it shtels to it, connects it somehow is enjoined with the Kiddush, with the suda. I'm sorry. So according to that svara, if it's just to make the two should not be disconnected, lav dafka to din an actual makam, and that would be a makam for the remaining Nissim Gaon svara to say that even b'bayis the bayis, true, you might have stam das. If you stam walk from house to house and you make Kiddush one and you have the suda in the other, then they're disconnected. But if you have das to begin with, so there's no actual Hesach Hadas, so then that Nissim Gaon holds that does help. So it comes out that it's really a sodistic machlokas between the two, between Tosas and Reb Nissim Gaon. Now, just to add maybe one layer of amkus to the svara of you need an actual makam. I just want to give you a makar. Brought down this for you. Once saw there's a sefer called Sefer HaMachriya, which is one of the Talmidei Rashi. So he's coming to explain the din of Kiddush Malchus Suda in the name of Rashi. He says, Kach Kasav Gam HaMora, the Mora, the Rebbe, and the Pardes Shelo. Rashi wrote a sefer called Sefer HaPardes. So the Sefer HaMachriya is quoting Sefer HaPardes of Rashi, saying, Tahada Tanya is Choras Yom Shabbos L'Kadshay, Zachoria Al Hayayim B'Knisaso. we're going to look more later on. We'll see in Daf Kuf Vav Amud Aleph, Mr. Drasha that says Zachoras Yom Shabbos Kacha Zachoria Al Yayin. The din schira is Al Hayayin. So Lav Dafka Yayin who didn't pass Yachol Kaddish Alav. Even though it says Zachoria Al Yayin, it doesn't mean Dafka Yayin. It could also be pass. We know that you could, if you don't have Yayin, you can also make Kiddush on pass. Or if you prefer that, some person will you make it Tachatchil even on pass. The only reason the Gemara says yain, the ikr thing is to be koveya on something, but the reason it says yain is because that's orchan milsa. Usually people have more simcha to make kiddush on yain than they do on pas. Even if you made a netter that you're not going to eat anything that night, still you could make Kiddush on pas and eat. He says that because we know as a general principle, and the Gemara says that if you ever take a shvua not to do a certain mitzvah, then the shvua is not chal, because we say that since ein shvua chal shvua, we're all mushba b'oimi b'har Sinai. It was already chal shvua on us. We're all makabel b'shvua har Sinai to keep all the mitzvahs, and one of the mitzvahs we're makabel to keep is Kiddush. So what? What does that tell us about pas? So it says Rashi, Gavalig, ain't Kiddush el b'mashu kovea sudaso o pas o yain. Iksiv across the Shabbos oneg hamakam kriya shamte oneg. Rashi is saying that there's a din that the Kiddush is made on a suda, basically on yain or pas, because you need to have the place of kriya needs to have an oneg. It has to be in that place. Together, you have the two. You have a kiddush together with the suda. Therefore, even if you made a shvua, so that since there's a chiyuv to make kiddush, and kiddush doesn't work without pas or yain, because you need to be koveya the kiddush al hayayin or al suda on oineg Shabbos, makom oineg Shabbos shami kiddush, or so then the kriya the kiddush. So you're mechuyev mihar Sinai to eat something at the Shas Kiddush. So it's a Gavala Kiddush of Rashi that first of all it is a din deraisa according to Rashi that the din Kiddush Makom Suda. The Kiddush Makom Suda is mamish a dinia Kiddush that you're not yotze Kiddush without that Suda legamre. So and therefore he says that that's why there's a kfiyus of a makom, because in order for it to be considered Kiddush al hasuda, which would be pas or yain, it has to be in the same makom of the Kiddush. That's what Rashi says in a pardes. So that's just a level of amkus and understanding in this din in Mokum that it's mamash a din in the Kiddush. So that was one side. The other side is the din of Hesach Hadas. Like we said in Nissim, there's not a din at all that it should be mamash the same thing. Just it's a din of the cheshivas of the yain to be not disconnected from the Suda. Now the there's a nafkamina between these two stadim, which takes us into the next sugya. Whether or not you can compare the din of Kiddush Makom Suda and what's considered a Shinui Makom, and the shalos of the Gemara, which we're learning right now about Rav and Shmuel and Iger La'ara and all these things we said, and Savri Mina Mipina Lapina or Makom LaMakom, depending how you're Goris in the Gemara. Can we learn out, or can we compare the dinim of Shinui Makom or dinim Makom Suda to dinim of Shinui Makom and Makom Suda Legabe Brachos? The Gabe Birchs and Ninden, the Gabe Birchs and Paris and other things, they're supposed to be eating in one place and then Shana Makomo change to another place. So the horror, based on what we're saying, whether we compare these two things or not, is dependent upon this machlokas. If you hold that Kiddush Makom Suda is a din in Hesach Hadas, like a Nissim Gon, then there's no way to learn one from the other. I'm sorry, for Keret. Then they're mamish the same halacha. We don't necessarily have to have a difference between Hesach Hadas. If we know Hesach Hadas, we can know Hesach Hadas all the way through across the board. So if it's Hesach Hadas for Kiddush, it could also be Hesach Hadas for Shar Brachos, and vice versa. If there's a new din, a special particular din in Kiddush Makom Suda, that there's a special requirement, a special chiyuv Torah, a special tanai in the mitzvah Kiddush that has to be mamish Makom Suda. So then, lav dafka, you can make any connection or a raya or a susal between these dinim and the dinim of shar brachos, because over there's certainly no din of makom suda over there. There's clearly hilchos brachos is totally in hesach hadas. So that'll be the nafkamina between the two. So it should come out according to this cheshbon, and it seems like a strong cheshbon that whether or not to compare the two will be totally on the machlokas Tosfos and Rav Nissim Gaon. Because according to Nissim Gaon, it should be a good comparison. It's hesach hadas, and therefore that's why he holds that if you don't have hesach hadas, even we bice the bice, it helps. In Tosfos, it holds you have to have a same makom. Then there's a din of makom suda. Then of course should not be a comparison. That's how I first originally learned the sugya. The problem is that go a little weiter, you go a little further, and you see that we seem to contradict that right away. There's the Bir Lacha and Kufa and Ches. Bir Lacha is over there is, as hopefully you saw that. The Bir Lacha in the beginning of Kufa and Ches raises a shaila that if you make let's say you're eating apples in one room and you walk out to the other room, that should be a din shinui. That should be a hesach hadas, and you have to make a new bracha in the next room, or even if you come back. And he says you see like that be'etzem from Tosfos. There's Tosfos in Kuf Aleph Mud Aleph. Through Maskal Aval, Mimakon L'Makon Bechad Besa. The gears of the Gemara, according to the Tosfos, is one says go. Yeah, the Gemara said, okay, but as the Shmuel at time, Amar Shmuel ain't kiddush ala makom suda. Saber mina hani mili vice the vice. Ava mimakom lachad besa loy. If it's mimakom the makom in the same house, not. Ava the Rav Anan bar chliva zimin sagian ava keimne committed Shmuel v'nachas meiger la'ara harder mekadosh. He went from one room to another and he made another kiddush. So we see that and kiddush ala makom suda, and you see that micheder lecheder is considered a hesach hadas or a shinin makom legavi kiddush. You need a new kiddush. So as it says, perish micheder lebais la'aliyah. Kamo mi'igra la'ara ava mipina lapina yesh kiddush. There's no problem mipina lapina. Ki hechida lachashuv shinin makom b'samach. Just like it's not considered b'samach in the next amud in Kufal Amud Beis. But the Gemara over there says the shini makom needs a new bracha, regular brachos, and then the Gemara goes on to say, Yosef Idi Bar Avin Kamed Rav Chisda Yosef Rav Chisda Kamar Mishmei Rav Huna. How the march shini makom tzarich levarach lo shana ela mibais lebais. Avim makom lemakom loy. So we see that. Only mimakom and makom you do. There's a shinu makom the gabi brachos and not mipina lapina. Now there is a girsa over here mipina lapina as well, but the Gemara ends off. It says Amalei Idi Bar Avin Haket Tanina Mastisin de Behenek Amalei Mastisin Kavasecha. There's a raya to you, meaning that it's so the shaila is now. What's the Gemara's maskana coming over here? It's saying that. If her goris over here, and the Gershas Marshal is lo shana elam mibais lebais, I mean pina lo. So then it comes out that mibais lebais, according to Tosfos, who already said when he discussed the Yerushalmi, bais lebais really means micheder lecheder. So all the Gemara is saying is pina lo, from one pina to another. It's not considered a sheni makom, but we end up. If bais lebais is lav dafka, it means micheder lecheder. So then we end up saying by hilchos brachos there is a shinu makom micheder lecheder. So and Tosfos says that. So we see that it's really the same din. The kiddush and hilchos brachos are mamish the same din, because he's garis over here also makom the makom we thought is okay. Micheder lecheder b'chad b'isa, kamash malan the ma'isa of Shmuel that he went up and down from Igor L'Ara, and he made another kiddush. So we see the Cheder Lecheder, but also Bais is considered a Sheni Makom. So according to Tosfos, they have the exact same din. Why would they have the same din? Because they all are totally in Heschadas, both Hilchos Brachos and Hilchos Kiddush. You can compare the two. The two can be, interchangeable. The two sugyas are compared to each other. So according to that, it comes out that it would be a steer and Tosfos B'nei Abei. Then, if we're saying that the Yisod of Tosfos is that it's a din makom, a special new din makom like Kiddush, it's not comparable to Shar Brachos, then what's Tosfos over here comparing to Shar Brachos? See clearly that it is one din.
I'm sorry, the Gemara by Kiddush, Tosfos is learning that bias means from cheder lecheder, or
yes.
And then
he said that.
And then he learns the same.
He spelled that out before in the Yerushalmi when it says bias the bias, it means cheder lecheder.
So that's what he's saying also in Tosfos Dibur Maskal Aval Pirush Mecheder Lebayis and Lebayis Aliyah.
He says clearly just like it's not considered a Shini Makom. The only thing that's not a Shini Makom is Mipina Lapina, just like the Sugi B'Samuch. So he's Goris, I guess, like the Marshal, Mipina Lapina, but Mibayis the bias, which means Mecheder Lecheder, yes, is a Shini. So he's saying that they're the same din.
Meaning he's changing the Gersa by Rav Idi. By Rav Idi, where it says Mibayis Lebayis Aval Mimakam Lemakam Lo, he's changing that Gersa to be Mibayis Lebayis, meaning cheder to cheder, aval mipina lepina lo.
We're just looking at, and you have on the side there from the Marshal.
Yeah.
It says.
It's mipina. Oh yeah. Okay. Lebayis aval mipina lepina lo.
Marshal says that's the proper girsa, I guess, according to Tosfos. Says mipina lepina. The only thing the mipina lepina lo, but not mecheder lecheder. Mecheder lecheder is really bias the bias. So the only thing that's not a shinin makom is mipina lepina.
Both by brachos and by.
Right.
Okay.
By Kiddush, it's the same din.
So Tosfos is holding that it's a Hesach Hadas is the.
So that's you have to say that Hesach Hadas. So if it's Hesach Hadas, so let's go back to the original machlokas then, back to the machlokas from Nisman going into Tosfos, whether it helps to go bias the bias. So we understood that the reason the machlokas was that Tosfos needs the oso bias because you needed Makam Suda, and Nisman going he's the one with the story of Hesach Hadas. Now you see the Tosfos Kar doesn't hold that way. So now we have to understand what's the shot in Tosfos that you need also bias. What's the machlokas Nissan going and the Tosfos now?
Right.
Okay. So I think we can say one of two things at least. Maybe there's more things to say, but I have two studim over here. There's a third side which I don't really believe. So I'll throw it out maybe just as a svara, but a third possibility. So one possibility is to say that it's really both Tosfos and Rishon going really hold that it's totally a svara of Hesach Hadas. There's no dry din makom, not like the Rashbam in the first lashon. Even though Tosfos in the top of Kuf Amud Aleph quotes that lashon in the Rashbam, he doesn't quote the second lashon. He only quotes the very top Tosfos in Kuf Aleph. Says Dein Kiddush Alav Konsuda from the Ksiv Karasa l'Shabbos Oneg Kalamar but Makom Kriyas Kiddush Shamte Oneg. So Mashma Tosfos does hold as a din in Makom. Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, the top Tosfos. Right, so that Tosfos would indicate that he holds that there is a din makom. So if so, then what's the machlokas? So one possibility is to say that Tosfos holds that there are actually two dinim. One din is that you need a din makom suda, and that like that drasha is mashma. And the definition of a makom is nothing more than the entire house. But anything outside the house, that's already not the same makom. Now, and that's therefore it's impossible to entertain the thought of another house like the Rambam going. However, even within the same house, there's a second and there's a possibility of having a Hesach Hadas. Besides, even if it's considered technically also makom, the same makom, the makom is very wide and it's considered the entire house is considered that makom. Even so, there would be a din of possible second din of Hesach Hadas. That since the stam das is to eat in a certain place, so then it becomes like Dilchas Suda then, in a way that if you're not thinking about the other place, So then, even though you might technically have the same makom, but the gavra might be mesiach daito, because you expect to eat in one floor, you go to the second floor or to a whole other room. So then perhaps that's considered hesakadas. So in the second din of hesakadas, so Lagabi that din, Tosfos would be learning the comparison between this and Shar Brachos in this second halacha over here.
Would we say that Rav Nissim Gaon also holds of both, or that he only holds of Hesach Hadas?
Only hesakadas, because there's no way to say that the other house is the same makom.
So it's only Tosfos that has both. He would say that you need makom, and then on top of makom, you also need Hesach Hadas.
Right.
And you need not to have a Hesach Hadas.
Not hesakadas, right? That's one possibility. The other possibility is that he totally agrees with the Nissim going inside the etzim sword, the etzim yisod, that everything is totally in hesakadas. It's just that there's a side machlokas of how far can you say that person still has das, or do you say if you go to a whole another place, it's sort of like batla daito. Since some people don't have das, go from one house to another, then you can't extend your das that far. It's going too far to extend your das, which to me is a little more stubborn as far to say that way without creating two dinim. And then it's a direct comparison between our sugya and the sugya of Hilchos Brachos and the other Tosfos. It's just difficult for me in my own cheshbon from the top Tosfos that he quotes the first drasha that it's the Kiddush of Makom Suda. So maybe unless Tosfos doesn't learn it that way, he learns that that's also, even with that drasha, it doesn't really mean a din Makom Batsim. It's really a din that the Makom should not be Mesiach Daita between them. Which, that part is difficult for me to understand, to hear. So, because there also was another rive from Tosfos. Is another rive from Tosfos. Let's think of what it was. Oh yeah. I was thinking that perhaps there seems to be another rive from Tosfos that it does hold as a din makom, because Tosfos, if you remember, said previously by Machlokes of Yossi and Rehuda whether there's a din masikin or not. If you start beheter, do you have to be mafsik or do you have to? Yehuda said you have to stop and make kiddush and bench and everything, and then we saw because the shulchan. Rabbi Yosef said no, you can keep on eating until the night, and then you bench and you make kiddush at the end. So Tosfos asked over there, what about kiddush makom suda? And the kasha Tosfos for sure assumed that kiddush makom suda means you have to be kaveya the suda on kiddush. So where do you have the din kiddush makom suda? Tosfos answered, since you're making kiddush in the place that you ate, so then you're yotzei kiddush makom suda. So in that case over there, of course, it's very fair because your mom is divorced from the suda in a way that it's not kaveh on the suda. You already benched for the suda, and now, punkt, in that place you're making kiddush. So for Tosfos to call that kiddush makom suda, it would seem to indicate that he holds clearly that it is a din in makom. In the makom, because it's not really. You can't say that the kiddush is connected to the suda in any way more than it's in the place of the suda. So with the combination of that Tosfos plus the Tosfos on top over here that says the drasha, the Rambam of Sham Tehei Oneg, Shami Oneg, the Makom Kriya, it's not sure there is a din Makom in Tosfos, and therefore we have to come back to the first shot in Tosfos that the reason you need Bais Echad not like Ben Nissim Gaon is because he holds there's a din Makom, and the Makom can't go further than the house. What is dust? It says as long as you have dust, eat over there. So I guess you could learn that gufa in two ways. Either you could learn it that it says new din has a gadas, or you're sort of stretching the makom. Your das has the ability to stretch the makom within the same general makom under the same roof. Yeah. So the stam makom is where you are. Das extends the makom to another place, but you can't say that way because then again you wouldn't have a comparison between hilchos suda and general hilchos suda, hilchos brachos, and kiddush. Since it does compare the two, so we're faced with this, steer and svara, where we have to say that there are two dinim, and the comparison in Tosfos between the two is in that second din, the din of Hesach Hadas, on top of the din makom that there is beside kiddush. That's what I would offer to say, without being totally besimcha about it. As some say, it might be shop, but it's not. It's like not Kedei Sevilla. It's needs that, to be not totally satisfying. It's just very geschmack that Rashi himself, Rashi says, oh yeah. So we went to the next Nakuda. We're really tying it back together. Rashi said that in the Amud Beis and that Shalach Hills Brachos. So Rashi is Goros from Makom LaMakom, not Pina LaPina. He says clearly Rashi Makom LaMakom, and he says Makom LaMakom means B'bayis LaAliyah. He's saying B'bayis LaAliyah. So according to Rashi, the case of B'bayis LaAliyah, that's explicitly the case that Shmuel was Mekadosh again. B'bayis LaAliyah. So if that's the case, then you want to say hello? Somebody wants to say hello.
How's it going?
He forgot his English, so he's.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hey, holy people. So nice to see you guys.
Good to see you.
What's going on? I'm so proud of you guys. Steiging. That's beautiful. So proud of you. Thank you, Rabbi Fried.
Okay.
I mean, didn't we say that Rashi was like not like we don't use the Rashi in Psachim?
It seems to be, it's generally the Rashbam is more Barsancha or whatever, but in this case, I saw that the Bir Halacha is B'daik from this Rashi. So I guess he did learn the Rashi. So yeah, I had the same kasha, but he says a deal from Rashi that we see from Rashi that the din of Kiddush is different than the din Shar Brachos. Because by Shar Brachos, the Rashi learns his Goris Makom LaMakom, and he says it means the B'bayis LaAliyah, which means as far as can be within the house, a whole different place. And still with Gemara saying it's good. And the Gemara says clearly by Kiddush that that's not good. Shmuel made another bracha of B'bayis LaAliyah. I guess unless he had specifically had das for that. So Bir Halacha is learning, and he quotes the in Kufayin Ches, he quotes the Ram Chalaba, Talmud Rashba, that himself asked the Chor, why is there a steer between Hilchos Kiddush and Hilchos Brachos? And it says shiny Hilchos Kiddush that is totally in Hadas from Hilchos Kiddush that he says the words the Makom Pita Garim, the place of the pas, that's Garim. And there's the Makom Pita, the place of the Suda, that's what's Garim, the din Kiddush Makom Suda. So it's not in the din of the Gavra of your Hesek Hadas, it's a din in the Makom Pita Garim. So he goes with that Ram Chalava, and he shows that anybody that's Goris in our Gemara, in our Sugi, Mipina Lapina, instead of the end, Tosa says in the end, yes, Goris and Mipina Lapina lo. Kamash Vulan, that Mipina Lapina is okay, but Micheder L'Cheder is not okay. So according to that Girsa, Kiddush is totally different than Shar Brachos. Shar Brachos Micheder L'Cheder is fine, and according to this Girsa, it's not okay. I'm sorry. According to this Girsa, by Kiddush it's not okay. Micheder L'Cheder, that's considered a hefsek, and it's not considered Kiddush Makom Suda. You need a new Kiddush. If you had das to eat in this room, and then you went to another room, you changed your mind after Kiddush, you went to another room, you need a new Kiddush, according to that. And Mashen Ken Hilchos Brachos, you wouldn't. That's clear in the Gemara that Micheder L'Cheder is okay, Hilchos Brachos. And then Rashi says over there that the Igra L'Ara from B'bayis LaAliyah is fine. So Rashi and all those that are Goris, Pina Lapina, holding not like Tosas. We're not comparing Kiddush to Shar Brachos. Because by Kiddush, Makom Pita Garim. Why would that be? So the answer is, like we saw from the Sefer Apardes of Rashi, that B'makom Kriya Shante Oneg, that's the din, Mushba Omi B'Har Sinai, to eat the Suda, because that's a Cheluk of Kiddush Mamish. The Kiddush and Suda are one unit, and they're inseparable. That's why there's a din, Makom Pita Garim, you can't separate that unit in any way. So there, we have a Havamina that even Mipina Pina is not okay, and Kamash Valon that maybe as long as it's in the same room and etc., then it's still not considered a Shinui Makom. But even that far, you would have thought. Kamash Valon, that's not. But Cheder is a problem. So it comes out Rashi, the Shitaso, very Geshmak, the Rashi that's Machalik between here and Hilchos Brachos, the Hilchos Brachos is Goris, and according to Rashi Girsa, that Cheder L'Aliyah is okay, and here it's not okay. It's because Rashi the Shitaso holds that it's one unit, Kiddush, Mida Raisa, Kiddush, and the Suda. That's what comes out very Geshmak according to Rashi. Okay. Yeah. If you remember, the Nakuda that the Birlach was talking about over there in Kufayin Ches was, again, he was clearing the Shala. If somebody made a bracha on an apple in one room, he walks to the next room. If it's not Devarim Batun and Bracha Lacharem Kamlam, which we'll learn about in the upcoming sugyas, like Pas or whatever, in the middle of a Sudas Pas, we'll have to see why that's so. If you're in the middle of a zonos or Pas, that there's a different din. But by things that don't need a bracha in the same place, you don't necessarily need a bench in the same place where you ate. It means ain't tunin bracha lachrein b'mkoman. So those things, if you walk to another room, whether it's considered a shini or not, depends on this machlokas. So he said it's better not to walk out to another room, but if you do, then you shouldn't make another bracha because of this whole girsa Rashi and Pina Lapina. So it's just halacha l'maisa on that. Just before we go weiter, is it's brought down from Rabbi Shlomo Zalman and Rabbi Yoshev that if your minig is to walk around the house when you eat, like a lot of people do, they're little kids, they're running after them all the time. There's no way you're sitting in one place all the time. You have to be chasing them around and changing diapers and taking the bathroom, and so you're always walking around. So then there's a stam das on that person that he's always walking from cheder to cheder, because we said everyone agrees that cheder to cheder das helps. It's only if you didn't have das there's a problem with cheder to cheder, but everyone agrees that cheder to cheder with das does help. So if stam you always walk around, then you have stam das like that. According to that, I would always suggest to people to make a tanai in their das. Just make a one-time tanai. You can do it even right after the shiur. You can make it right now during the shiur. Just say, my das is officially that whenever I eat something in one room, I'm kaveh my das to walk around the whole house with cheder l'cheder. Just say that one time, and that becomes say it's forever, and then that becomes your stam das forever. So then you don't have a shalach brachos anymore.
That psak of Shlomo Zalman and Rav Elyashiv apply also like to a situation, meaning like a person normally he only eats in the dining room, whatever. He doesn't go eat in the bedrooms or something like that. But when he's on an NCSY Shabbaton, so there he would eat in the, let's say, the dining hall, and he would also eat in the hallway and Shmira, and would also eat, wherever else the teams would be found. Like, so there you'd like walk away. So like on a Shabbaton, could you say that a person would have stam das when he's going to the hotel, he's outside of his normal situation. So there he doesn't know, he'll eat anywhere there's going to be food. But in his home, maybe he would only eat in the room where the food is. Could you apply it like that also?
If you're in a hotel and the food is being served in the hallway, and the drinks are over there, and this is over there, and you have stuff all over the place, then there's clearly das to be walking in and out and taking food and stuff like that. If that's a setup. But if everything is in one room, and then it's all in the dining hall, whatever, and then you just take one kappa shoes to somebody out in the hallway. So then it's not so pashut.
So it's generally accepted that das is inherently situational, that like whatever the circumstances were can imply that someone has das to relate to that circumstance.
If depends, like a circumstance, like we said, that if you're eating in one room but all the food is being served in the next room, so then you're for sure have das to be going in and out. That's clear.
Right. So if you show up to someone's kiddush on a Shabbos, right, and they make kiddush inside, for instance, and the food is served there, but a lot of people start, wandering out to stand outside because it's nice outside. Right. That's a
much bigger problem. That's unless we'll see later on, unless there's Rias Malkum, that you can see that place from where you made Kiddush, then that could become a big problem. Even then, it's not so pashut to mitzvah Kiddush, but that we'll see already.
Okay.
All right. So going on, we'll see how far we can get now in the Shulchan Aruch itself. So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Ein Kiddush l'makom suda v'bayis echad mipina l'pina chashuv makom echad she'in Kiddush lechal b'pina zu v'nimlach lechal b'pina cheres. If you look at Chakan Gadol, ein tzarich lachzor with a kaddish." So the Lashon Shulchan Aruch is mashma b'diavad. If you kaddish in one pina, v'nimlach, and then you change your mind and you ate in a different pina, I feel the Chakan Gadol, even if it's a big palace, a different corner of a huge room, in tzarich lachzor the kaddish. So the Lashon Shulchan Aruch is not that you're allowed to go do it there. It's that it's I have to call a quick time out for a second. There's a doctor's office. I'm going to take a quick call and I will be right with you. Hello. Speaking. Okay, so is it possible to call back in about 15 or 20 minutes? I'm just in the middle of giving a class. Thank you. So the Magen Avraham over here in Os Aleph is medayik from the Shulchan Aruch. It says, "Aval chatchila lo yasaken b'hal yesh osrin." Chatchila, you shouldn't do that. If you make kiddush over here, you should then move over to the other pina, because since there are those that are osir, there are gersos that end off that it's also from pina to pina. So this Magen Avraham is a point of a lot of contention that the Lashon B'diavad, he's learning the Lashon B'diavad in the Shulchan Aruch to mean that even if you already made the Kiddush without das to go to the other corner of the room, then B'diavad, you can go there, but l'chatchila you shouldn't. L'chatchila it would be also to go to the next corner. The Reb Kiveger over here strongly disagrees and says that the Lashon B'diavad over here is only going on making the Kiddush to begin with das to eat here and then let's say not having the das l'chatchila to eat in another place, in the other pina, and even that's it's only on Mila. Once the pascha in the pina is mutter, so Mila makes it more of a makom kiddush, makom suda, and kiddush and makom suda if you had das already b'shas kiddush to do that. But once you already made kiddush, even if you didn't have das, so that's already not called b'diavad. It's not called moving l'chatchila. It's already after the fact. You didn't have das, okay, fine. So you should have had das to move over there. If you didn't, it's still mutter to go over there. It's not an issue at all. And the Bir Lacha, the Shard Sion over here in Osdalad says it's meduik from the Gra like that as well. So, I mean, we spent some time on this. How did he really learn that from the Gra? It's I can explain to you, but it's going to take a little bit of time. The way I understand it, that the Ramah says. Second, this is over here. Somebody's messed up in my Shulchan Aruch here in a second. Okay, I think I'm not going to really go into this. It's going to take a long time to go into this. So I think I might just, if you want to spend time in the Gra, and it will take us probably 15 minutes just to explain this Gra, and we're running out of time. So anyway, so the Magen Avraham is machmer. Mr. Brura says that we don't need to be machmer this way because of the kasher of Kveger and the Gra's machmer as well. He still ends off. Even though he says that in the Sharat Sion, but in the Mishnah Berurah itself, he does quote the Magen Avraham. So a lot of times it's hard to know what he really holds when he does that. When he says he quotes the Psachim Logan Rum and top and Mishabura, and then Sharatzion says, "Achora, you don't really need to be machma like that." It's a little hard to know exactly what it really holds. He did in the Bir Halacha afterwards. Dira Maschel v'chen Iker at the end of the Sif. So there, in the middle of his discussion, he said, "We already wrote back in the beginning of the Sif that we don't need to be machma like it's not going to run." So there it's mashma that he is holding, like he said in the Sha'ar Tzion, that once you made Kiddush already, if you didn't have das, maybe you should have had das to begin with to eat over there, but if you didn't, you're allowed to move over to the other pina. The Shulchan Aruch Harav he quotes the Magen Avraham like it says, it was mashma that we do need to be machmer, but the Chayadim does not quote it. He just says that you don't have to make a Kiddush again, but it doesn't say that you can't move over there. So it seems to be a little of a shaila in the poskim of if you have to be machmer like this Magen Avraham or not. But there's certainly what to rely on. The Bir Halacha and the Sha'ar Tzion say that you don't have to be machmer. So if you made Kiddush in one corner, you want to go and sit down in another corner, sit down with somebody, then there's certainly a very strong tzad to rely on the Mishnah Berurah, on the Sha'ar Tzion to go sit in the other corner. Mishnah Berurah Sifkat and Daled says that if your kavanah is to eat here and then you move to another room, so you have to go back, you have to be chozer makadesh, even by sechad, since you didn't have das for that. So on that, they bring down from Shlomo Zalman Rabbi Yoshev that, like I told you before about Hilchos Brachos, they say the same thing by Hilchos Kiddush. That if you generally walk around your house all the time and eat in different places, so then we can have a stam das for that as well, to say that it's not considered a hesek das to go eat in another place, in another room in the same house. So what we said by brachos will also apply by this, because it's all Indian of hesek das. Now from the halach over here in Shulchan Aruch that it says that here it says, the Ramah says, "V'bayis l'sukkah, chashim k'mipina l'pina." From the bayis to the sukkah is considered mipina l'pina. The question is, how could that be? The whole definition of pina l'pina is the same room, and this you're going into the sukkah. So the based on the Mishnah Berurah says, based on the Magen Avraham, that we're talking about a sukkah that's inside the house. Sometimes, like in Yerushalayim, like Shlomo Zalman's sukkah, he was one of the Yerushalmi sukkah. He just turned a lever and the roof went off, and the whole front part of the house was a sukkah, and other rebbeim like that in Yerushalayim also. So the next room is a sukkah, and sometimes they'll put up just a wall to be there to have sort of make a demarcation that it's clear that it's a sukkah. They'll put a piece of wood up there or something. So since it's really in the same house, and the Magen Avraham holds that since that's only there the shem mitzvah, but so then really it's still considered the same room. The mechitza sukkah in the same room is not considered a hefsek to be considered another room. So rather than it's not even considered mechada l'cheder, it's considered mipina l'pina. So the Bir Halacha, however, he brings the achronim that dofen the sukkah is chashed to be mafsek. That the dofen you put up the same mitzvah is chashed because it's there the same mitzvah, so it's considered like another room, and it is considered like mechada l'cheder. That if you didn't have das, you would have to make a new kiddush or a new bracha. However, on the other hand, the das of Lavush is the opposite. That he holds the opposite. That even if it's outside the house, since a person goes from the house to the sukkah all the time, even outside the house, it's considered during the week of Sukkot, it's considered like the same house, and even like the same room, because you're always going in and out of it. So since you have machlokes and mikatza l'katza, so if you did make kiddush inside the house, and now you want to go out to the sukkah, let's say you made it kiddush in the house, and it was misty outside, so you thought you're not going to be able to go eat out there, and then it stops. Now you can go back out in the sukkah. So if you just realize that when you made the kiddush, after the kiddush, then the eitzah that the Mishnah Berurah says is to drink a revius yain besides the mala lugmov, the first amount of sip you need to drink an additional revius yain right there. So then you're for sure you'd say, at least we'll see when we get to later sifin, das agonim, you don't say with the yain itself, kiddush makom suda, and then you can then go out and eat in the sukkah. It's not a problem. You don't have to make a new kiddush. It's already yotze in the first place. Okay, now there's another nekuda here that Shulchan Aruch says that when that yesh omrim shekol sheroa makomo afilu mibais lechatzer and tzarich lakso l'kadosh. Even from the bais to the chatzar, you're not even in the same house anymore. If you see the place, you don't need to be mekadosh. So now, and the Mishnah Berurah says, how will they come makom echad? And the makor is the tour. It says in the name of Hagon, one of the Gonim, Hagon Sar Shalom, and the Maggid Mishnah also B'Shem Hagonim. They say that this helps even be bais lechatzer if you're royal makomo. Beis Yosef says we learned it out from the Gemara in Brachos Daf Nun by two chaburas. They're eating together. They're starved to each other for a zimun, to have 10, as long as they're rowing. They're rowing zez that they see each other. So even though over there that Gemara is talking about by Sechah, Tosfos over there in Brachos and Daf Nun and Beis says that rowing mixasan works even by two batim, even not in the same house, by slachatzer, or even two batim it helps. He says over there, even two batim. So now, so of course, according to that, if Tosfos says that even by the bais, then what the Shulchan Aruch says over here, bais l'chatzer is lav dafka, it means even bais l'bais. You can see, if you have two big windows between two houses, and you make kiddush in one, and then you can see the other place clearly. You're allowed to go over to the next house and eat over there. And the shaila is, how does this work? What's the lumdus of this? So is it a svar of hesach hadas that when you see over there, then there's no hesach hadas because you can mamish see. Or is it when you see over the other place, then the Riyah makes it like it's makom echad mamish. It's considered one makom. It's by Riyah, you can mamish expand the makom, and it's considered the makom doesn't end here. It ends to where I stop seeing. So the chorah, this depends on the two study we learned up until now. If all you need is hesach, not having hesach hadas, so then you could say that the malyusa of Riyah over Stam das, according to the Tosfos, that das doesn't help from one place to the other. According to the Nissim going holds that das does help from one place to the other. Those that are cholak on him, so you could say, okay, maybe das doesn't help from so far from one house to another. However, if you see the place, then the das does help. Then it's considered there's no hesach das. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that by day that you see from one place to the other, it's considered mamish one makom. So that would help then, if that's the case, that would help even if you hold, like the Rashbam, like you said, or the one side of Tosfos, that you need mamash makom suda. There is a din in the chefs of the suda, like Rashi and our pardes, the makom pita garim, like on chalava, you need makom pas. So, but if the chiddush of Riyas makom will have to be a much bigger chiddush, that is the same makom. Because less than that, it won't work. Even if I have das and no hesach das, that still doesn't turn it into the same makom. I need makom pita. That's what you have to say. So I think there's a very geshmaka raya to this, to say this tzad, because the Chai Adam brings a raya to this din, the din in the Gemara in Brachos by two chaburas that Riyas makom helps from the Gemara in Zvachim Daf Kufi Ches, and on the base that's talking about Mishkan Shiloh, and there's the din. Mishkan Shiloh by Achilas Kachim Kalim. Kachim has to be eaten in the Mishkan. Kachim Kalim, let's say by Beis Hamikdash you can eat in Kol Yerushalayim, but by Mishkan Shiloh it says Kol Haroya. You can eat it B'Kol Haroya. The pasuk says. So whenever there's Riyas Makom, then you can eat Kachim Kalim as long as you can see the Mishkan from there. So if you're on a mountain nearby, you can see it. Then you can eat Kachim Kalim there. And the Gemara has all kinds of shilas. If you can see it. When you stand up on something, you can't see it when you're sitting. Is it still in the same makom? You see mixes makom or not? There's a bunch of shilas in the Gemara about how exactly to define the riyah. But so what do we see over there? Thereby, it's clearly not a din of hesach hadas. It's clearly a din of makom echad. The Brisk Rav says in Chumash in Parshas Rei that the Chodesh Griz on the Torah says that there's a din that by the Chiddush of Kol HaRoeh by Kachim Kalim and Mishkan Shiloh is that's all that there's a din lifnei Hashem. So whatever you see is considered lifnei Hashem. So the makom is defined by whatever's lifnei Hashem. Whatever you kol haroa is mamish lifnei Hashem. So if the Chayadim is learning the din of riyas makom from here to over there, from over there, so we see just like over there, it's mamish makom echad. It's considered all lifnei Hashem. If it's matter to eat kachim kalim, even far away, as long as you can see it, it's mamish makom echad. Then there's room to say. Then that's what the Chayadim is alluding to over here as well. And that's why, even though we pascha not like Rav Nissim going, the das does not help from bais lebais, but riyas makom does help because it's not das from one makom to another; it turns it into one makom, and that's why it works.
So, Rabbi, we're saying that the riyas makom, the ability to see that, like seeing the place where we originally made the kiddush, that extends it, that now this is considered like it's also that place where we did the kiddush,
Right.
because I can still see that spot.
Right.
So does that only apply if I am actually seeing the spot, like I'm roa makom, or is it
As long as you
like
could
even if
see-
I just have the ability, like
have
if
the
I turn my back to it, that's still okay?
have the ability, like that's they say also that let's say you have by the chabura that they see each other. So it says even if mixas chabura sees mixas chabura, you don't need everyone to see each other.
Okay.
Or if you
As long
or
as it's-
and Shlomo Zalman says another kaddish that since he holds that since you're allowed to move around the whole room, so therefore it's anywhere in the room that you see, then that considers it the whole room one makom. So that's
So
big kula.
So I know like lechatchila we don't go with that daya, but b'diavad we could rely on this of riyas makom.
So the Mishnah Berurah says that he says it shouldn't be samach on this except for b'diavad and shasat chak, because many achronim disagree with it. We're just explaining those who say it. The Shulchan Aruch does say it. Many achronim are cholak in the Shulchan Aruch. When it comes to bais the bais, they hold nothing else. So they're cholak on this whole vort. They hold maybe they hold that riyad only takes away hesek hadas. They hold it doesn't turn into one makom. So the cholak on the Shulchan Aruch. So he says only shasat chak. He says like this: shasat chak, a beautiful heshman. If you shasat chak, you need to, then you have a tzira for this the das of Shulchan Aruch over here, plus the das of Nissim going. The das always helps, even when we bais the bais. So with tzira for those two, we say b'shasat chak. B'diavad, if you had riyas makom and you had das, then or he says b'diavad, even if you didn't have das, really, the Nissim going is an extra added thing. But b'diavad makom shasat chak, he says you shouldn't be salach on it, but if you went there and ein sarach in a chozer of mekadesh because of chashash b'chol v'tola.
So
So like the way.
So Masha Shahaya, we had a Shabbaton that happened where two houses were rented next to each other. The food was set up in one house, and then I guess like they mixed up, and like the kiddush was basically in one house, and the food was in the other house. But there's no eruv in the area, so they went out like basically to a place where you could see one to the other, and they made kiddush in one spot. They ate the meal in the other spot. So they could rely on this riyas makom in that case. Like that was definitely a shas adachak. They're not able to.
So I was going to ask this: how clear is the makom? Meaning, if you could see, like you have to see inside the room where someone is like standing to make kiddush, or you need to be able to see the place that you'd be able to go to, like where that was.
Yeah, as long as you see from one room to the next, if you're able to see.
But mamish the inside of one room to the next.
Yeah.
Now,
So
would that work also like for patios? Could we be like somech on the like that? It's like the chutzner also.
Oh, so that already there are days about that. That's not. Let's say if you have like there's a question of is the mirpeset in Eretz Yisrael. You know that's there's a machlokas of Shlomo Zalman Rav Yashiv that Rav Yashiv holds that's it's considered like a bais acher. It's like going to bais l'chutzner, and Rav Shlomo Zalman held that it's considered the same. Since people go in and out of the mirpeset all the time, it's considered one bais. It's not considered a bais acher or a chutzner. So that's my fault. I would be someone from Shlomo Zalman for that. And certainly, if you can see it, you see the mirpeset where you're making the kiddush, then the shall be you make kiddush in the kitchen. You can't see the mirpeset from there. And then you walk out, and it's next to the salon. So it's if you didn't have Riyas Makom, that would be telling this Makom because someone's on Yosha. Because if you could see it, the Kulian we have before Shalach over here, Bais the Chatzar works.
But if you're able to see it, and it's bias the bias though.
Yeah, so then it's not that pasha because, like we said, it is still a machlokas. It's still not totally pasha. There's also machlokas about the chader madrigot. If you're living in the building there and then the same kid, let's say you make a bracha and then you go out and you want to eat something in the chader madrigot right outside your door. You're snoozing with somebody out there. So there, Shlomo Zalman, Rav said it's only the part of the chader madrigot right next to your door that's like sort of for you to use. As you go further out to where more like the public space, that would be a shinui makom. And Shlomo Zalman held that since it all belongs to everyone, so everyone's house is really extended out to there, and it's not considered a shinui makom. It's considered like micheder lecheder also bais, not like another bais.
A weird question for a second. Is it implicit that seeing a reflection is not seeing the actual makom?
Yeah.
So you can't set up a mirror to angle into the two rooms.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work. No. You have to actually see it, or be able to see it at least. But if you put it like in an angle that now you can't see it from where you are, but you could,
That's what I'm saying. But so, for instance, so a door being closed to the makom is not. Does that mean you could see it if the door was open, or that door mamish has to be open at the time?
I think that would be enough that you could open it.
Right.
If it's often open and closed.
Yeah.
But anyway, all this, the Mishnah says to only be a song on that. That's all b'shas tzchak and everything. But so, I guess if it was such a b'shas tzchak and b'diavad situation already, so probably better to open the door and make it as good as can be.
That would seem ideal.
Yeah. So in that case, it's good to have an open door policy. Okay. Just see it. There's a lot more to talk about. I don't have time to talk about it all, but let's one more nakuda. In Sif Bays, where it says Kiddush Bayis Echad Al Manas Lechol Sham, and afterwards you went to Makom Acher, Tzarich Lachzor L'Kadosh Makom Shirotz Lechol Sham, and there the Mishnah Berurah said in Yud, I know a fila b'cheder acher, she also buys kevin shelo haisa daitel azer l'tchila. So even a different room in the same house. So there again, as we mentioned, so it's interesting. There, the Mishnah Berurah is being machmer saying a fila b'cheder acher. So even though the Mishnah Berurah and Kufa and Ches and the Bir Lacha that we saw was mekel by cheder l'cheder b'diavad, not to make another bracha, and here he's being machmer to say you need another kiddush. So we see that the Mishnah Berurah is actually being mechalik between Kiddush, the halacha between Kiddush and Shar Brachos, even B'diavad, and saying you need to make another Kiddush. It's not Choshesh Bracha L'Batala. So Shlomo Zalman said, it's brought down in Shemir Shabbos Kochasa, that maybe the Mishnah Berurah was really holding that the Kiddush is more chamer because he really strongly held to the shot that he said in the Rambam over there in Kufa and Ches and with the Ram Chalava and this whole thing that Makom Pita Garem by Kiddush, and you did mamish the same makom mamish, and it's not totally necessary das. So he holds that strongly enough that if you had das to eat here and you went out to another room, then you should need another Kiddush, unlike what he said by Hil's Brachos. Okay, I had a lot to say about Sif Gimel, but I think we're going to probably have to hold it here because already over an hour. So maybe we'll talk about it next time, or maybe not. I just do want to speak out one last point, at least, and make sure we get to it. That in Siv Gimel it says that you have to eat mekiddush to eat la'alter also mokum. In kiddush lo sad, you're not yet to kiddush at all. In tzarich lechal mokum kiddush la'alter. There's a lot of discussion over here. La'alter, what does immediate mean? A lot of discussion over here. So does it mean a few minutes? Does it mean anything as long as there's no heschadas? There's no. They seem to be told this really and the zman of heschadas. It's hard to really define that precisely. But it's brought from Rabbi Yoshe that it means a few minutes. Some say it means it's hilach yud beis. Some according say that how long it takes to walk 12 amos. which that's a huge chumrah. Like it takes a few seconds, it turns into Hezek Das. The Yasha was docha that and said that for sure you have a few minutes, but all you have is a few minutes. People don't realize this. People a lot of times sit at the table, you make kiddush, and then people sit and schmooze for 10, 15 minutes till they, someone gets, the cock to get up and stretch and okay, let's go wash. It's very, very wrong to be doing that. It's supposed to. The Shulchan Aruch says clearly the altar. So we can go back and forth how to define exactly the altar, but more than a few minutes for sure not. So now it takes to get up, get over, get in the kitchen and wash, or the big kiddush is also like a big kiddush. The people, it's brought down in the post community, standing in line for waiting for other people to wash. So then since you're osik in trying to prepare yourself for the Suda, then that's not considered a hefsek, even if there's a long line, you're there for a while. But to go off and just, start schmoozing and walking away and so on and so forth, then that's not okay. People need to realize that, and to, pass that on to people.
Thank you.
So again, there's a lot more to talk about here, but we'll suffice with that for now.
The big delay in our home is between Shira Malos and benching.
Yeah.
There seems to be 8 more conversations that pop up right around then.
Well, I'll stop the I didn't stop the recording. Oh yeah, okay. Well, okay, everyone have a great Shabbos, and we'll talk soon.
Have a great Shabbos.
Great Shabbos.
Also,
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
also.